Hi everyone and welcome to Schrodinger's Bathtub. This is my new science format show where I'm going to be talking about the things I love about science, about new discoveries in science, and I'm going to be talking with various people about their experiences with science, whether they're a science communicator, a scientist, or just somebody who's had a different experience to other people in dealing with science. So welcome to the show. This is my brand new layout, my new setups. Hopefully everything's working properly. I don't actually know, so you guys are going to have to tell me from the chat. But I'll start with what excites me about science. Science is what got us from living in caves to having computers on our desktops. It's what's given us the ability to move ahead, in ways that have made our lives both easier and more exciting. We've been able to find out new and brilliant things about the universe. Science is what pulls back the curtain and lets us see the universe's underwear. That's what it does for us. So we should get an enjoyment out of science. We should get a feeling of awe with science, with nature. But we should also be able to enjoy it to the point where we can say, we've learned something. Because learning something is what it's all about, So without further ado, I'm going to bring in my guest for today, the Jade Atheist. She has a different experience with science, having grown up as a young Earth creationist and now coming into the world of real science instead of that young Earth style. So without further ado, I'll bring her in and then we'll get into talking some science stuff and her experience with science. Hi Jade, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
I'm really, really good. So, your experience with science. I mean, as a young Earth creationist, where you're learning that the universe is like 6,000 years old, and
Yes.
the flood was a real thing.
Yes.
It must have been a really odd experience to come out of that environment and come into a world that's so much bigger, where we've got a universe that's 13.8 billion years old, where there was no major flood that covered the whole Earth, where we have dinosaurs that didn't actually live with human beings.
That was a big one for me. I didn't realize that was not true until a couple months after even coming out of Christianity.
Wow.
Yeah, Ken Ham really believes we walked with dinosaurs, so I believe that too.
Ken Ham and walking with dinosaurs. That is brilliant.
Yeah, he's something, and that's who we listen to a lot. So, and I do believe that my homeschool curriculum was through or what he wrote as well. So that was kind of the education I had. I did go to school until 9th grade. I think
Okay.
at the end of 9th grade, I was taken out of public school and was homeschooled.
So you did have some background in actual real science. So how did that correlate for you when you went from, because I've seen, as I was describing to you before, when my daughter first got depression and social anxiety, I had to take her out of school, and the aim was to school her by distance education. And the only way I could do that at the time was through a religious school that I did not realize was a young Earth creationist school. And when I got the textbooks for it, I took one look at those things and go, this is not happening. I have to find a different way to educate my daughter. So I know how odd some of the stuff that's in those books is, and that must have been strange for you coming from a secular school system. I assume it was secular, or was it religious as well?
Yeah.
It was secular.
It was secular.
And then all of a sudden seeing the universe is 6,000 years old and there was a flood? I mean, I know you would have been taught there was a flood, and you probably had at home 6,000 years old Earth and stuff like that, but was it odd to see that change in the science? That it was...
It was but so I was taught this even in church, that evolution was not real and the Earth is only 6,000 years old. So not only was my mom and my grandma telling me that these things weren't real, but my church was too, and my youth group leaders, and in Sunday school they would teach us these things. And so I was taught how to not listen, basically, to what my science teacher was saying. And in fact, I was an arrogant little Christian girl. I thought I knew everything. And I remember we had to write an essay on how we personally think the earth was created. And this was after I had been pulled out of the class talking about the Big Bang and evolution and stuff. So I didn't have any information on that, but still had to write how I thought the earth was created. And I wrote a 1-sentence essay saying, I know for a fact that God created the earth. And I failed the paper, and my teacher the next day was talking to us, and she was like, I totally understand that people have different ideas about science and stuff. She's like, I just want to ask the class as a group, like, do you think it would be effective as a scientist to look at a situation and say, all right, my book already says this, so how does this fit into what my book says? Or look at the situation and say, okay, I have no predetermined ideas whatsoever. I'm going to study this and see what comes up. And if it matches your book, great. If not, oh well. And I defiantly looked her in the eye and said, Christian scientists are real scientists, and you can be a Christian scientist and find and do science research based off the Bible. And, she was a teacher. I was a 9th grade student. She wasn't going to argue with me anymore over that. But I was so sure that I was right.
I always find that thing of Christian scientists, because there are more scientists out there. I mean, legitimate scientists who write papers and follow the facts and everything that are Christian than there are so-called Christian scientists. And they all use the scientific method. They put their science first, and then they correlate that with their religion. They come back to it. My dad was a school teacher, but he loved science. And it was his way of doing things. If the science came out and said this thing is a thing, that was what it was. And then he fit that within his religion, and his religion was very broad. Even though he was a Christian, he went into history of other things, and he would say things like, there's aspects of our God that were obviously adopted from the Babylonians. It's like, okay. He was incredibly forward thinking in that sense. And like I said, like I've said to you before, taught all of us kids critical thinking to the point where none of us are particularly religious anymore. So it's like,
yeah.
And it's funny how that happens. If you're taught to critically think, if you're taught to look into the real evidence of something and not just go by rote, you will tend to move away from a religion that's hard, set, and fast, and more to either to no religion or to a religion that's flexible enough to accept the scientific truths.
Yeah.
That seems to be the thing that young Earth creationism especially seems to stamp out with its mantras of "Were you there?" or how could you possibly know? And God first. It's if your science comes down to mantras, then it's not science.
Yeah, no. So. That's very true. And my mom always, the separation, or like the reason she could justify why people had how Ken Ham could look at something another scientist was looking at and get a completely different idea. And she legitimately believed that you were either a Christian scientist or an anti-Christian scientist, basically. Like, either you were a Christian trying to prove that the Bible was real, or you are a heathen scientist who's adamantly trying to disprove the Bible. And there's no in between. You can't just be doing science to do science.
That is the way that Ken Ham paints it. I mean, if you've seen his, I think all of us have seen his debate with Bill Nye, and you can see that's exactly how he paints it. I come from it with the Bible first, and everything has to fit the Bible, or it's obviously wrong. So, if your position is one of I'm going to shove my head in the sand, basically, then you're not going to achieve anything. You have to come at it rationally, and the rational position is to go, I don't know, let's find out.
Yep. And it's not this, I don't know, and I want to prove the Bible wrong, so I'm going to manipulate it so it doesn't prove the Bible.
Because most of them
That's what my mom
put
thought.
the Bible aside. You go and talk to any actual Christian who is a scientist, and they will go, my faith is here, my science is here. I don't base my science from my faith. I go and do my science. I start with a hypothesis. I do the experiments. I calculate all the results together, and I come to a conclusion. And if that fits my religion, yay, awesome. If it doesn't, it's still awesome and it's still right. I just have to adapt how my faith is to accept that, which is why, and I guess there is an element there of, I get Canahan from a point of view. If you're going to set aside aspects of what's in the Bible, there comes a point where you've set aside most of it, and then your faith just comes down to, I believe there's a God. And it's no longer technically Christian anymore. You know, it moves away from that. I get his point of view that, you know, if we've got to put the Bible first and trust in the Bible and everything, because if they don't, they're moving away from what that is. But, you know, we know that the Bible's not a solid translation even of what was meant by the early Hebrews or the early Christians. And it's been adapted and changed and bits inserted into it and reinterpreted into new languages over and over again, so much so that its original meaning is really hard to derive unless you go back to the original text. And even then, it's deriving it because everybody has their own different take on how it works. So it's an incredibly human thing. It cannot be inerrant because it is filled with errors just in translation.
Yes. And it's so, like you said, it's so open to interpretation. Everyone can get different things out of the Bible. In fact, one of the things that my church actively practiced was, talking to God in times of prayer. You pray with your Bible and say, Lord, please speak to me or whatever. You open your Bible and you read the pages that are there and you find something that answers your question. Like... Did you ever use the concordance to go, I'm feeling something about this, or I'll look up in the concordance and read this? I think concordances are dreadful for kids. Yes.
Because it lets them go and find an individual passage which says something about what they're wanting to look at with no context.
Yep. And that's what we had.
It's the destroyer of anyone who's LGBT. Because if you go looking for passages that way, there lies damnation.
Yep.
Even though
we had a whole list of, like, if you're feeling this, look for these passages. And the passages that they put with the emotion or the experience you were going through, if you actually read through the whole passage, didn't fit. It's just that one verse maybe you could get to match up with this feeling or emotion or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of odd how that kind of works out. It's part of the indoctrination.
Yes.
It very much is. It's like, you're feeling bad about this thing. Go and read this Bible verse, and here's our little devotion which explains it to you. So you're going to know it the way that we want it, and we're going to take everything else out of context.
Yes.
Because the Bible is full of context.
Yes. And that's how it was so easy for me to believe young earth creationism, even when everyone around me was telling me, like, this is so wrong and you demonstrably wrong. Like, if you look into it, you can prove yourself wrong. And I just wasn't willing to, because in my mind, it was Satan trying to confuse Christians, because, anything that leads you away from the Bible is Satan. And so when I was confronted with these ideas, even evolution, I didn't have a solid understanding of what evolution was because I was taught evolution through my church. So I had a conversation.
You were taught macro and micro evolution. And
yes, I thought there should be half animals walking around, and that was my argument to people. And thankfully, I never had anyone treat me the way they probably should have with that, and just been like, "Oh my gosh, you're stupid. That is not how this works."
I imagine Kirk Cameron's Crocoduck featured heavily in the things that were coming into your head, even and you would have very much had that thing that a dog is always a dog.
Yes. Yep.
And if humans come from monkeys, why are there still monkeys?
Yep.
Which is a complete misunderstanding of how evolution works. I mean, obviously, because you don't evolve out of your clade. You are what you are. So humans are monkeys, old world apes, and that goes back to being we're mammals, we're eukaryotes, all the way back. So you don't stop being what you were, you just get new features, new traits, and those new traits that are beneficial to survival stay. And when it's not heading anywhere, it's just beneficial at the time. Humans will continue to change. Even if we're looking at the global warming. Well, if we fill this planet up with a whole heap of extra water and it changes our oxygen content in the air, humans will evolve to fit that. Well, a lot of us will probably die out, but us as a species may not die out entirely from global warming. A lot of species will, but we probably won't. But we will change because we will have to evolve for that. And it'll take time, but evolution can happen quite quickly when it needs to as well, because the beneficial things are the ones that survive the most. And this is where there isn't that understanding of, especially when you look at these small changes add up over the time to make the larger changes. That is what the religious call macro evolution, but it's not macro evolution, it's all evolution, it's all the one thing. So,
and some of that I now have fully makes sense. Some of it I'm still learning. Evolution is a huge topic.
It is.
And I'm 28 years old. I just started looking into all of this probably about a year ago now. And that's everything. My religion, my morals, my political system, everything.
Yeah.
And so it's taken there's just not enough time in my day to look into everything that I want to.
And you shouldn't have to look into everything. I mean, that's one of the beauties of science. If you've got an interest in something, if something piques your interest, you can go and look it up. You can go study about it. But you don't have to understand all of it. I don't understand all of it. I've got a very good basic understanding of evolution, but I'm not a biologist. I will defer to somebody else who's, someone like Gutsy Gibbon or someone like that who actually studies biology, who actually knows what they're talking about, because it's not my field. But I know enough about it that I can talk about it, and I can talk about it reasonably confidently if I was talking to somebody who didn't understand about it, without leading them too far off the track. And I think that's all any of us need to know. We need those basic, even if all anybody ever gets about anything is a basic understanding that's actually grounded in actual science, is all people need to understand how these things work. I mean, I've selected a couple of sciencey things this week to talk about, and I'm quite sure most of the science will be over quite a lot of people who are in the chat. And I'm pretty sure some of it's over my head. so I know it's going to be over yours too, and because it's over mine, but I can talk about it because I have a fairly decent basic understanding of how this sort of stuff works. So I'll bring out one for you so that you've got so I can bring something in on the topic, because this sort of comes in my field of physics, and well, not that physics is actually my field, but it's my passion. Maths is my field, but physics is my passion. But this is a new field, new discovery, which ties together biology and quantum mechanics, which is kind of interesting. What's happened is that at the University of Queensland, they've developed a new microscope for looking at biological things. Because generally speaking, when you've got a microscope, you focus photons, so a beam of light, often with high-powered microscopes, it's lasers. If they're invisible light spectrum, because we need to be able to see it. You can't use if you want to look at biological things, we need to be able to see it and photograph it in a way that we can see it. So electron microscopes aren't much use for this. So we need to have photons so that we can get an image back. So they generally use a laser. The problem is the smaller the thing is you want to look at, the more power, so more photons you have to send at it to get an image back. But the more photons you send at an organic thing, the more likely you are to damage it. You send enough laser pulses at a cell, you're going to kill the cell. So what they wanted was a technique whereby we could not have to send quite as much light at the cell, but get more detail back. So what they've done is they've created a quantum entangled microscope. So they have two beams of light. The beams of light are quantum entangled. So when the first beam hits the cell or whatever organic matter it is they're looking at, it does its thing in its bounce back that helps them produce the image on the CCD camera element that picks up the light that comes back. But they also fire a second one. Now, because the two streams of photons are entangled, something that affects the first stream will affect the second one in more or less the same way. It's not exactly the same way, because you'll often get things like if a spin changes on it, it'll spin in the opposite direction on the entangled particle. But they know what causes these things, so you can allow for it. So what you do is you detect the one that bounces back that actually hit it, but you also detect what happens with the quantum entangled one. So without having to hit it with two photons, you're actually doubling the intensity of the signal that you're bouncing back off it, and you're only having to hit it with one of them because these two photons are quantum entangled. So they can increase the intensity of the beam, the effective intensity of the beam of light that's bouncing off the cell or whatever else it is. It's an organic thing, so it'll be a cell, without having to actually force more photons onto the cell and thereby doing more damage to the cell. So increase your resolution, but not do as much damage, which I think is absolutely fascinating. Now, I won't go into details about how quantum entanglement works, because quantum physics is one of those topics. Richard Feynman said, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics. It is that kind of subject. It is incredibly complicated, and I'm not even going to pretend to understand it in any complete sort of way. But basically, when you quantum entangle two particles, it doesn't matter how far apart those particles are. If one particle is affected by something, the other particle will react to that as well. So you can have these two beams that are quantumly entangled without only one of them having to hit the thing that we're trying to look at, which I think is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's so amazing what people can do with science. I hear that and I think, how do you even go about starting to figure that out? And I know they spend years and go to school, and I get it, but that's insane that people can.
It's kind of strange how science has changed. If you go back Isaac Newton's time and before, what you've got is people who've got an idea. They think they've discovered something, or they've got a new effect. So they experiment with it, they figure it out, and then they derive the math that works with it. So Newton had a problem when he was trying to calculate accelerations of points, and he couldn't do it. So he had to develop an entirely new form of maths, which we call calculus, so that he could do these calculations. So, because you have problems in maths when you're dealing with infinities or zeros, and you've got to do divisions and stuff. So calculus lets us overcome those problems by introducing limits and what happens as numbers approach other numbers. So it's a bit more complicated than that, but I'm not going to go into a detailed example of what calculus is. But what's happened over time is, as we've got more robust theories of science and we've developed the maths to a greater degree, we've got really strong maths in general relativity and special relativity, and we've got really strong maths for quantum mechanics. And what's happening is pure mathematics is looking at these equations, which we know work on the macro level of things, and we're breaking them down and saying, hey, there's a solution in this equation. This should mean that something happens. Let's build an experiment to find out if it does. And if it does, that solution to the equation is a truth in science. And that's how the Higgs boson was discovered. It comes out of the equations. It should have existed. It needs to exist for the smaller particles to have mass. I mean, the mass of particles is mostly their energy, because energy is mass, mass is energy, and mass, because of that, the energy equivalence of the matter is mostly what their mass is. But there is a small amount of mass that doesn't come from that, and that's what the Higgs boson was needed to solve a problem, and it comes out of the equations. So then we spend billions of dollars building the CERN collider so that we can find this thing. So in a sense, the knowledge we already have and the maths that we can do with that is helping to drive our next level of studies. And that's the same with chemistry and with biology. Science is being driven differently now to how it used to be, because we've got a pretty decent understanding of the universe. So where we see little problems in our equations, where we see things that don't quite work, there we know there is new science. And that's why we know there's things like dark matter, because we can see how galaxies move. We can see how much light is bent by a certain cluster of galaxies, and it's more than the visible mass that we can see in that cluster. So there has to be something else providing more mass to that cluster, so there's that more gravity there. There's a reason for that, so we call it dark matter, because we can't see it. Now, it doesn't actually mean it is matter. It could be a phenomenon of space itself. But what it does mean is there's something there that we don't understand, and that's why we go out looking. We develop experiments to try and figure out what that is. And that's the beauty and the excitement of science, because it's about discovery. I mean, science is our new Magellan. Magellan gets on his boat and sails off, and you get Captain Cook, or you get Christopher Columbus in the oceans, and but science is that. Science is that level. And sometimes we see it like in moon landings or future missions to Mars or something like that. But sometimes it's people in a lab breaking new frontiers in science to discover something that may be really tiny, or something that fills the universe that we're seeing through telescopes. And it's not something we see every day, but as we find these new things, we've got something better to look at. We've got a better understanding. Without those experiments that happen in that way, we wouldn't have the computers, we wouldn't have the tablets, we wouldn't be able to stream, we wouldn't be able to communicate like this with each other. And that's exciting when you look deep down at it. And that's why I think it's worth having these discussions in the different ways that we talk about science and stuff. So, and I'm doing a long babble about why I want to do this stream. I mean, it really should be about you and yours.
No, and I appreciate how you explain things too, because some of this I do understand now, but like I said, I'm a year into this, so I appreciate you explaining things to me.
I'm trying to explain it, and I'm trying to keep it simple, because some of this stuff, especially when you're dealing with things like quantum mechanics, it has to be simple, because even that's the only way I learned it, because it is incredibly complicated. And when you talk about general relativity and you talk about how matter bends space, and people go, "You what?" It's like, when you first hear that as a kid, you go, "What? How?
Yep.
How does that happen?" Well, to be perfectly fair, we don't know how it happens. That's part of the problem. We know matter bends space. We know that is the cause of gravity. What's the mechanic that causes space-time to bend by having mass in the middle of it? We don't know that. If we understood that, we could probably make things like anti-gravity and we'd be flying around the universe. But we don't understand. It's one of those things that we're still discovering. And if we understood those things better, that's part of what studying something like dark matter is. Something new and exciting can open doorways to other avenues of understanding the universe. Mm-hmm. And I know Christians often misquote this, but Einstein talked about it as knowing the mind of God. He meant it in a metaphorical sense, in that, if you've got an all-powerful being that can create all of this, the more we understand, the more we're like gods in our knowledge. He didn't mean that there was a God, because he was an atheist, or at least an agnostic. But that's the thing. The more we know, the more the wonder I think there actually is to the universe. I mean, most of us can look out and we go, "Oh, the stars are amazing." But when you realize that gravity collapsed a giant region of hydrogen and helium into this ball that then got dense enough and had enough pressure at the center that it started to fuse hydrogen into helium, and therefore got hotter, and then pressured out because of that. And then the external gravity started pulling in more of the gas cloud that was around it, until you got to the point of having a stable star, and that star will continue to fuse its hydrogen for billions of years, usually. I mean, unless of course you're a real super giant star, in which case it's probably millions of years. But that's absolutely amazing. When you actually know how that happens, you can look at this. Oh my goodness, how amazing is that? That the way our universe works is such that this can happen. Now, I realize old you would go, "Oh, isn't it amazing how God did that?" Because that's how we go. And have I lost you, Jade?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm out in my garage, so I'm going to go inside. I think I'll be closer to my internet.
No, that's okay. That's okay. But
normally it's not a problem.
Normally it's not a problem? Oh, that looks lovely. You've got a lovely day out there today.
It is gorgeous, which is why I try to sit outside, but...
It is absolutely gorgeous today. So, like as I was saying, the more you know about the universe, the more beautiful the universe actually is.
Yeah.
And it's something I think a lot of people who are young Earth creations miss out on, because if you're constantly going to turn around and say, "God did it," you're missing the majesty of it. And something can be majestic without having a creator. It definitely can be. And the wonders of the universe are in our learning about how it operates, how it functions, not in some God did it. Because if you stop at some God did it, you don't have any reason to find out the rest of it. And wanting to find out more, I think it's human nature. It's why people hopped on ships and sailed halfway around the world to find the new world. It's why we went into space and everything, because it's human nature. We want to explore, and that exploration includes the finding out how it works. We've always done that. Since we evolved brains big enough to want to do that, we've always done it. It's how we got fire. It's how we smelted iron. It's how we did some horrible things too. But ultimately, I think most of what's come from it has been beneficial to us as a species. We live longer now because our science is better.
And Ken Ham never has anything new. He's not like when we were on. I think we were either
on
Ken Ham or Ken Hovind. We were looking at articles that they were just
AIG.
out.
It was Answers in Genesis, so it was Ken Ham.
Yeah, and they were just reusing articles because they aren't discovering anything new. They're not.
No, they're recycling. Yeah, he'll post a new article, and it's one that he posted 10 years ago. I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. Science is finding new things every day. If you read science journals, there's something new all the time. There's a new field to look into. There's new discoveries in science. If you go and watch someone who is a scientist who does videos, Dr. Becky would be one person I would push anybody in the direction of go and watch Dr. Becky. She's a astrophysicist, and she studies black holes, and she talks science all the time, and she talks about the things that she's working on. She will talk about other discoveries in science, and she is always excited. She is always looking for that new exciting thing that's happening in science. And that's where I come from. It's like, this is exciting. This is amazing. And even the things I look at and I go, well, that's rubbish, because you get that quite often, especially with people like Elon Musk, where he talks about shoving people in big tubes and shooting them hundreds of miles very fast. You go, yeah, we're going to make pancakes. Yeah. It's but it's still exciting. It's exciting that they want to try something, even if everything I know about science tells me this is a bad idea. The fact that people are wanting to try something new, work on something new, the concept of making an electronic roadster that was incredibly fast and could drive hundreds of miles is something that was pushed aside for so long because, well, petrol was so much better. And yet the dreams of somebody like Elon Musk is what gave us the Tesla. And now all the car companies are doing it because it's good for it looks good for them because they're being eco-friendly, and it is good for the environment, and it's good that we're moving in new directions with new technology. So I can't condemn him completely, but I can say, yeah, it's great. You've got money, Elon. You want to throw it at weird and wacky ideas and see what sticks. Go for it, dude, because that's exciting. And it gets people excited in science, even if I think some of your ideas are absolutely whack.
That's true. It does get people interested in at least looking.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Shoot, also with things that Christians say, or Ken Ham, and one thing I believed about the flood.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned that earlier. That's another thing that I just recently found out that there's not evidence for all over the world.
I did a video. It must be about 18 months ago now, where we did Ken Hovind talking about the flood and everything, and tore it absolutely to shreds. There are so many problems with the whole idea of a global flood. First of all, where's all the water? There isn't enough water, even if you melt all the polar ice caps, to cover the entire planet. Now, if you're going to say it was in an encrusted ice shield that was around the Earth that then melted and fell down on the Earth, then you are expending so much heat into the atmosphere that I wouldn't be worried about the rain. I would be worried about the fact that we're all going to be boiled alive. And nothing would survive that. Not even Noah's Ark. I don't think they had air conditioning back then. There's no way he was surviving this. So it's one of those things. If you add up the science, it doesn't matter how you try to do it. I remember, I think it was Kent who was talking about the fact that when the depths opened up, they created ballistic things of ice that shot out and hit the moon. And I'm like, no, that didn't happen. The the amount that this Earth above it would have had to compress down to provide anywhere near that amount of thing would have boiled the oceans. Because you have to release a certain amount of energy to do these things. They don't just happen magically. I know people like Ken and Ken want it to all be magic because that's what a deity comes down to, is effectively magic.
Yep.
But I live in a real world, and there are real world consequences for things happening. So this did not happen. But what you can have is a local flood. And there are plenty of stories of local floods, and these stories become legend, and they become thing. We know there were local floods in the Mesopotamia area. There was like when the Black Sea broke its banks, and thousands and thousands of miles of land just flooded overnight. And these were close enough to when the original stories started getting written down, that these are probably where a lot of the ideas of a global flood, because to them that was the globe. Their world was this area. They hadn't explored beyond it, so the people who were writing at the time, that was the world. So they weren't lying. They weren't saying, oh, there was a global flood. They didn't say global flood, flood that covered the world. It was their world. The term wasn't even global because a lot of them didn't even realize the world was a globe. Because the Bible doesn't even say the world was a globe. It says it's supported on pillars and it's let out flat for the eye to see, which is why flat earthers think the world's flat. Because it's a religious thing. So
thankfully, I did not believe that.
Well, Ken Ham doesn't believe that, and neither does Ken Hovind. So most of the young earthers don't, but there's a number of them who do. They take those passages literally, and so. But you've got to remember that these were shepherds. These were grazing people who, some were educated, especially the priests and that, but most of them weren't particularly well educated. So what was written down was what they saw each day, and to them the world was only so big, and if there was a oral legend of a big flood that covered most of the land that anybody ever knew about, then that covered their world. So I'm not saying there wasn't a flood. There most likely was a flood. There were always lots of floods. Didn't cover the whole world.
Right. Yes. And just because many people had floods doesn't mean it all happened at once, because that's another thing. A lot of them were recorded at different times, but I was not taught that. So it's weird coming out on the other side and learning all of these things that I was taught and the actual explanations for them. Like, oh, okay, that makes complete sense. That makes way more sense than a god.
it really does when you get past, as we were saying before, the doctrine and the mantras of were you there, or I mean, were you there is the main mantra. Were you there? Were you there? Yeah. Well, Ken, were you there when Jesus was nailed to the cross? Mm-hmm. Were you there when Noah built his boat? It goes in two directions here, Ken. It does.
It does go both ways. He has the Bible that tells him, and a relationship that tells him.
Ah, okay. See, I've always loved that. I have a relationship with God, and that's why I know that it's true. That's always like that feels like the ultimate cop out. It's like, I know it's true because I know it's true, is basically what he's saying.
Absolutely.
And my answer to that is, I'd like to see some evidence. The evidence is I know it's true. That's not evidence. That's not how evidence works.
Or I would show you my Bible. Here's my proof.
I'm sorry, the Bible is not evidence for science.
No. Yeah, I think about the things that I used to say and the arguments that I used to give, and it's kind of embarrassing. But, when that's all you're taught, and even the idea of, believing that things can happen because of a God makes it easier to believe things that aren't true. Because you don't have a factual basis for the things that you believe. And so you don't need a factual basis for things in real life that you believe. So even though I was constantly presented with ideas that proved what I believed wrong, I knew that I was right, because that's what the Bible said, and that's what my relationship with God was saying, and it didn't really matter to me. Like, also the other idea is, Satan is here to deceive us, and that's his whole goal. So everything that these scientists are doing and all of these things that are factual and make sense are to deceive you. And so, of course, it sounds like it makes sense and it sounds correct, but that's what Satan does.
Yeah.
And so when you constantly have this idea that everyone who's not a Christian is trying to tell you stuff just to deceive you, you stop listening to everyone around you. And that's dangerous as well.
No, I totally agree. It comes back to that concept of the indoctrination as well, that, because you've got Satan on this side, who's going to deceive you, and you can't be dragged into this deception. You have to follow your Bible. There's that fear element there that, oh no, I can't follow this because I'll end up going to hell. And it's almost like there's no carrots to religion, that's all stick. So it's like,
no, and the fear thing is definitely, it's just constant fear, because also anything that isn't of God can invite demons or Satan into your life. So you also have to be careful even about the things that you're listening to or watching, because you could accidentally invite demons into your home. So there were many times where I thought I was being watched or followed by a demon because of things that I had done, and had elders come and pray over my house, or my mom thought that I was going to be possessed at one point, so they had people pray over me and blessed our home. And how terrifying to be told, like, oh, you enjoyed chemistry in school today, that's an opening for Satan, we need to pray over you now. Like, it's so traumatizing to children. I constantly thought I was going to be possessed, and I was constantly allowing these bad things to happen.
There's this aspect of you're in the world, but you can't be of the world.
Yeah. Yep. Yes. Exactly. We're here, but we're not really here. We're aliens.
So we have to other ourselves. We have to other ourselves from other people. We can't be part of the world. We have to be separate. We have to be. We have to be good Christians. We have to.
Yep. And everyone is secretly persecuting you.
Oh, yeah, that persecution complex. And at the same time, generally speaking, most of these churches are all about persecuting others. Because that's what the Bible tells you. If you're not with us, you're against us, so we persecute you. So, but we're so persecuted. We are so persecuted. Even
though I was freely going around to everyone around me, talking about God, showing them my Bible, asking to pray with them. I was doing all of this very openly. I had Bible studies in my school even, but I was persecuted.
Yeah. Which makes it hard for a young person. If you're growing up and you want, and you're in that environment, to be able to actually comfortably learn science. I mean, and I don't mean Ken Ham science, I mean actual science. So the difficulty for you was going to a secular school. You'd be sitting in class going, this isn't what my Bible teaches me.
Yep.
To the point where you're not really listening, you're not really learning it. You might go home and ask a question about something, and then you go, well, let's look at what the Bible says.
Yep.
Or let's look at what this devotional that Ken Ham sent us has said. Because you've got to reinforce that biblical perspective, which isn't the Bible's perspective anyway. It's the particular church that is providing the indoctrination's perspective, not the Bible's.
Oh, sorry.
No, go.
My uncle is a self-proclaimed prophet. and believes that he gets prophecies from God and stuff. So we would generally go to him if we had questions. My mom thought because she was a woman, she shouldn't teach us things like that.
Oh.
And my dad was an atheist, so we weren't really supposed to go ask him our questions because he would lead us the wrong way. So my
mom and dad stay together?
Oh, they stayed together till I was 17 years old, and I have no idea. There were many times that they split up, and they should have divorced a long time ago. But I think my dad was really concerned about what would happen to me and my sister if we did get divorced, because he was the one who was there for us no matter what. And like anytime we were in bad situations, my mom was very judgmental and telling us what we did wrong to deserve these bad situations.
Oh, because that's Job.
Yep, exactly. Yep. And we're supposed to be persecuted. That's what being a Christian is. And, and so my mom would give us really toxic ideas about these. And so my dad would kind of wait until we were alone, and then he would talk to us and just be like, I love you. You are a good person. This does not make you bad. And he would never actively contradict what my mom said, because that would cause a fight between them. But he would just tell us, I love you, and this is not the end of the world. When I got pregnant, I was not the worst person in the world for having a baby outside of marriage. And so he was kind of just always there to support us. And I think that's why they stayed together so long. But it was not a good marriage, that's for sure. And especially once my mom started actively saying that we shouldn't go to my dad because he was a Satanist and was going to...
She went from secularist to Satanist.
Yes, yep. Because you can't be mad at something that's not real. And everyone knows that God is real because it's written in our hearts. So if you don't accept him, you are actively rejecting him, which makes you a Satanist. So that's what my dad was.
So therefore, everybody who's a Buddhist or a Hindu or whatever else is also now a Satanist because they worship another god.
Yes, because they're not worshiping the true God. So yeah, they would actively encourage
the playground rides they go on to come up with these things.
Oh yeah. And my uncle, he because he thought he was a prophet, he was trying to learn look at the old religious texts, and he was learning some Hebrew and Latin, and he was trying to basically write out what the Bible would have said in the original language. And so when we had questions, they would go ask or tell us to go ask him. He would pray to God and give us this divine answer.
Yeah. I always loved that, because at that point, that divine answer is you've read a few passages in your Bible and you've thought something yourself. It's like, just take credit for yourself. You don't need a god.
Yeah, yes. And now it was really easy to, or not easy, I say easy very lightly. Once I started questioning my religion and what I was raised to believe, it was easier to just kind of say, yeah, all of this is crap. Because if what I was learning wasn't real, and if the God I believed in might not be real, how would you determine how any God was real? And if I don't need my God to be a moral person like I thought I did, to ensure a salvation in the end time or in afterlife like I thought I did, don't have to worry about going to hell, why do I need religion? Like, don't get me wrong, I struggle with depression. I struggle with anxiety. Most of these things because of my upbringing. And sometimes having relationship with Christ was easy to fall back on in those moments.
Oh, yes, I agree.
It gave me comfort. It gave me a place where I belonged, a sense of belonging, I guess. But now on the other side, I can find those things without God. I found a community online of people that have been absolutely amazing, and so supportive, which I was not expecting. I have a family that's super supportive, and I'm even finding comfort just in myself and who I'm becoming and who I want to be. I don't need a God for that. So why supplement something you don't need?
Yeah. No, exactly. It's very easy to see that to be moralistic, you don't need a God. And in actual fact, a lot of Christian people, despite saying I get my morals from God, are not particularly moral.
No.
If you think for 1 second that you're better than other people because of the things that you believe in, or because of your little book has told you so, and you're treating other people like shit because you think you're better than them, then you are definitely not moralistic.
No.
That's bigotry.
Yeah. Very much so.
And that's where a lot of deeply religious people come from. I don't see it in the people who are Christian without that deep sense of indoctrination and stuff like that. Because you do get Christians who are secular, and that their morals, they can admit that, well, I'm not following that bit of the Bible because it's not. It was written for a different time and it doesn't fit anymore. It's like. It's, and they can separate that out. They can see that, that these passages were written by people, and their pure basis on faith is just because they want a relationship with this God that they've got. And I get that. I totally get that. I get the need for needing that, for people needing that relationship, because there's a huge comfort in thinking that there's something beyond us, and that, this isn't all there is. There is an immense amount of comfort to that thought, and it may not be. I'm open to be shown that the case is that there's life after death and there's more to the universe than this. I just don't think there needs to be. I think you can get enough joy out of the life that we have, or everyone should be able to get enough joy out of the life they have. I don't think everybody does. I think we live in a world that doesn't give enough to those in need that everybody can get a good life. But I think in general, most people do get something good out of life. And if they don't, I want them to come to me and talk to me. I want to be able to tell them that there is always something good. Even in your deepest, darkest moments, there is always something good that you can come back to. Having been through depression like yourself, I know that there's something good on the other side of that, and you don't need a God for that good.
No, you do not. And it's actually more comforting for me to think that this is just all I have and then we die, than worry about eternal salvation. Because even as a Christian who thought I was going to heaven for a large portion of my life, I was scared of that too. I had no idea what heaven was going to be like, or what the idea of living outside your body was like, or what a soul, the concept of that all terrified me, even believing I was going to the right place. So,
and then there's always that fear of, maybe I've done something wrong and I'm going to go to the wrong place.
Yeah.
What if there's that, who wants to live in constant fear? I find that whole idea ridiculous. It's like, if there is a loving God, and the Christians always talk about God being a loving God, He's not going to throw you in a pit. That's not how a loving God works. A loving God doesn't chase you around the garden with a knife and saying, "Hey, you're going to do what I tell you, or I'm going to stab you." Because that is literally what the Bible comes out as. That you're going to be bad, and I'm going to burn you. If you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to burn you. Well,
and if you break comfort, you're even evil as a baby.
Yeah. You are born with original sin. Whose idea was that? A baby's brain isn't even fully developed until 2 years of age. How can you possibly hold a child which hasn't got a fully developed cognitive thinking brain to the same standard as somebody who's, 20 and should know better?
Right.
There is no way you can hold a level of guilt to a child.
No.
But, hey. And especially a level of guilt that is apparently something that some ancestor of ours did 6,000 years ago. That is
enough that you deserve to die.
Enough that you deserve to die. You all deserve to die because your great grandmother ate a fucking piece of fruit.
To have women. It's always the woman too.
Hey, always the woman. Yeah. It's like, no, this is not how any of this ever works. I've always said that if you read the Bible from a critical point of view, God is the evil one and Satan is the good guy.
I'm starting to realize that.
Because you've got them trapped in the Garden of Eden, and God's made this plant that's got this fruit on it. We say it's an apple, but it doesn't actually say that in the Bible. Made this plant with this fruit on it, and this fruit will give you a form of self-awareness that lets you know about what's good and evil, and to know the mind of God. And Satan goes, hey, this is actually good for you to know. You're no longer a puppet. You have a degree of self-worth if you eat this apple. Whatever it is, whatever fruit it is, you have a degree of autonomy. You are not just a mindless robot for God. That's what I'd do. That's what I'd say. Eat the freaking fruit. That's the moral thing to do. And I mean, even if you go to Job, I mean, God's the one who wants to make the bet with Satan and wants Satan to do the horrible things to Job just to prove God's point that he's so wonderful. And Satan's going, you what? Right? You want to torture this person to try and prove a point.
As God, I love this person so much, and I know that he loves me so much, but I just really need you to test this. So can you please just do your worst, and let's see if he still loves me.
Let's fuck this guy up and then see if he still loves me. And they're like, no,
that's abuse.
No. We don't do that. That's not moral. So
no.
From my perspective, Satan's way more moral than God ever is in the Bible. I mean, it tells the Israelites to go off and kill all their enemies, but except for the young girls who they might like to have sex with later. How the hell is that even close to being moral?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, at least they saved the women.
Oh yeah,
that's
saved the women.
Yeah, they at least saved them.
Yeah,
those women should be so thankful.
I think most of those women would have rather have been killed than the life that they were taken to as slaves and prostitutes, basically. So, there is nothing moralistic there at all. I mean, I'm not saying that the ancient Israelites were any worse than any of the other nations around them. They all did that. Yeah, it was a product of its time. That's not saying it was good. It was definitely bad. But if you have a God who's timeless and moralistic, they would know that and told their people not to do it.
Yeah.
But instead, they had rules on how to do it. And told them to actively do it. It's crazy. We've moved well away from science.
Yes, we have. I was just going to say, did you have something else about science?
I do. I do have something else to bring in. One of the things I put on the thing was about spider plastic. Technically not really spider plastic, but plastic is a major problem that we have at the moment. I mean, it gets into our environment, it kills marine life, it's polluting our oceans, it's polluting our land, because plastic lasts for centuries before and it doesn't really break down at that point, because all plastic is made originally from organic compounds, because the oil that we pull out of the ground is organic compounds, etc. We have more modern plastics, which are made from renewable resources, which are more biodegradable, like PET plastics and things like that. But it still takes a long... PLA plastics. PET is a really, really long time. Ones that are made from oils that take hundreds of years to break down in the environment. Because it will break down eventually. Everything does. Then you've got PLA, polyacetic acid based plastics that they're plant-based. So they're made from renewable resources, etc. These things break down in like tens of years, which is way better. But what the new material is it's actually made from soybeans, which is a renewable resource. But what they do is they use an electron microscope to manipulate the structure of the soybean proteins at a nanoscale to create the plastic with the properties they want. So these new plastics have a similar molecular structure to spider silk, because they copied the spider silk, but they've got the tensile strength of spider silk, but they're also hard like a normal plastic, and they break down in, within about 10 years. These things start really breaking down, not tens of years, within about 10 years. So in terms of putting it into landfill or something like that, this breaks down faster than a lot of other things that we throw into landfill at the moment, and it's fully recyclable, so we can completely recycle it, unlike some of the other plastics which are really hard to recycle. This is fully recyclable. The downside is it's quite complicated to make at the moment because we're using electron microscopes to control it, but they're hoping for better techniques to be able to create this plastic, and hopefully in the near future it'll be replacing a lot of the plastics that we use. So the plastic bags we get from the store will be made out of this because it will biodegrade quite quickly. We can even use it for some building products as long as we don't want them to have too long a lifespan, because 10 years is not long in a building industry. But because we can change some of the properties of it, they're also looking at ones that products that will last longer than that, and their aim is, because these products are easier to recycle, we can have things that maybe last 50 years but are completely recyclable. So if we pull down whatever we're using it for, so we can give it the properties we want by manipulating it, manipulating the molecular structure of these soybean proteins. So yeah, it's completely fascinating, and it's great for the environment. This is a great new technology for the environment, something really to get excited about. Yeah, okay, it might be a few years till it becomes mainstream because we have to have a production system that makes it cost effective for us, but it's something to be positive and look forward to, which absolutely. I think is a great thing. And this is something that we wouldn't have if we didn't didn't look into science in the way that we do. If we followed the Christian ideals of looking into science, we wouldn't have these new discoveries. We can't just turn our head away from science in favor of a couple of 1,000-year-old book. Science changes. That's the difference. Science continues to look for new things. It continues to change and adapt to the new discoveries that we have. It's not stagnant. It doesn't stay the same. Unlike a book that was written 2,000 years ago, which only changes because of misinterpretation. Science changes as we learn new things. It is adaptive. It is exploratory. And because of that, it's something that we should all be excited about.
I agree. And in my church, we didn't really believe that global warming was real, or if some people thought it was real, they didn't care, because by the time anything like that happened to the earth, we would be gone in heaven. So it didn't matter. God created the earth to last, for a certain amount of time until the final battle between Satan, and then it doesn't matter anyways. So
I really hate that. It puts aside responsibility. It says it doesn't matter what we do to this planet because we don't have to be responsible because it's all part of God's plan.
Yep.
Oh, that is just the worst way of thinking in my head. It's like we are the dominant. We are the dominant intelligent species on this planet. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say with dominant species, there's way more massive bacteria on our planet than there is humans. They are definitely way more dominant than we are. But as far as intelligent species are, the species who have the most impact upon our environment, we have to take responsibility for the things that we do to our planet, the things that we do to our universe. In a sense, I mean, one of the things that kind of bugs me a little bit is that we've got something else I wanted to talk about with NASA's Perseverance rover was the other science thing I wanted to put out. They finally finished with all the local testings where they were with the helicopter, which they've been flying around and testing on Mars. So that part's finished. So Perseverance has now moved on, and it's moving down into an ancient, what's perceived to be an ancient lake that would have been on Mars. Jezero crater, which would have been, which they think was a lake bed. I mean, obviously we need a bit more evidence for that, but that's what Perseverance is doing. So it's driving down in there and it's looking for signs of microbial life. But we have a problem in that early probes that we've sent to Mars were not completely decontaminated before they were sent. So there is a possibility that any microbial life that we find on Mars is stuff that we sent there. And that could be a problem because, but it's also a good thing because it also means that Mars is an entirely different environment to us. It is exceptionally colder. It has got a very frozen surface. There's very little water in the atmosphere. If microbes from our world have survived and reproduced and done well on Mars, then that is a good sign for life existing anywhere else. Even if we can't conclusively say that, there was life on Mars that was just separate from the Earth, we can say that life can survive somewhere like Mars, and it can thrive, which is a positive outlook for us finding life elsewhere out there in the solar system. The chances are that, given that we've got a pretty good idea that microbes could hitch rides on little asteroids that come off planets when bigger asteroids hit them and things like that. Well, we know there are some very, very tough microbes that can survive that, and that means that within a solar system, the chances of, if you have life develop on one world, that it'll infect the others with the life that came from that world probably means most of the life in our solar system has a common ancestor. Whether that first ancestor developed on Earth or on Mars or wherever else in the solar system, it could have even developed even earlier than that, when there were a lot more planetoids, and the big planets that we have now weren't even fully formed. They were only the smaller planetoids. Life could have formed then and then spread out through the solar system. But it's quite probable that any other life forms that we found within the solar system probably share a very similar genetic trait to anything that's on Earth, because the early solar system had lots of impacts, and any early life that formed would have spread between all the planets. So, but that doesn't mean we should try to infect other places, because we don't want to send our microbes somewhere else and kill off the local life form, because we need to see how things have evolved on other worlds. So that whilst this isn't necessarily a huge problem with Mars, which probably only has microbial life, so it probably hasn't changed much from early Earth microbial life, it is a big problem if you're going somewhere like Europa, which might have a big under the crust ocean and could have more complex life. And if we go and infect that, then we could introduce disease to we could be doing what was done in the New World when Europeans first settled and killed off large amounts of the indigenous population because we brought smallpox.
Yes.
So we could be doing the same sort of thing to another world. So it's not a thing we want to do. And yes, Harmonica Man, hail the water bears.
So that's fascinating. A comet is, I just want to make sure I understand this right. You said a comet can crash here and have living microorganisms on it. Oh, that's crazy. I did not know that.
Okay. I
Makes
mean,
sense, but
not necessarily tardigrades, although tardigrades are incredibly hardy and can survive in incredible situations. But you can have, not necessarily an asteroid. If you have an asteroid impact, the level of heat and disruption from that would probably kill most of the life that could possibly exist. But smaller meteorites, so you could have an asteroid crash into Earth. Some of the debris that gets thrown up might not get hot enough before they get into space that it kills off whatever's on them. That debris is more than likely going to contain microbial life. If they are extremophiles, which can exist within vast temperature ranges, etc., and harsh conditions, they will go into a dormant phase in space, and they can survive for hundreds, if not thousands of years like that. That's long enough for that rock to move around the solar system and maybe crash land on Mars. So all of a sudden, microbial life that started on Earth could end up on Mars, and vice versa. You know, we have asteroids that we know originated from Mars, little meteorites, not asteroids, that have been kicked up out of the Martian, off Mars by an impact in the past. They've crashed on Earth. So it depends how long they stay in space. It also depends on how heat treated they were from the original impact. But it is quite possible that the concept is called panspermia, where life moves around this a solar system or even around a galaxy by these smaller little meteorites that have traveling microbes on them that came from somewhere else. But there's also, as I said, there's also the possibility that life could have evolved in the early solar system when the sun was first forming and you had the initial light from the star. If you had smaller asteroid size objects circling close enough to the sun that you could have a bit of liquid water on them and you've got enough energy from the sun, there's a possibility life could have formed in those sort of situations on these smaller rocks, which are easier to break up without having to have as much as much heat be generated at the time, and these can break up and then spread around the solar system. So it's very much a case of if life developed somewhere on one planet in a solar system, that life is most likely to be the life that's found everywhere else, because it's a very good chance that it moved between the different worlds. It's not necessarily a thing. We're not exactly sure how long the microbes can survive in space, but it is a decent amount of time, and the early solar system had a lot of this going on. So it's quite probable that the type of DNA we have, the double helix style DNA, is consistent within our solar system, and it may even be consistent within our galaxy. That might be the life that has been passed around through the entire galaxy, and microbial life could be literally everywhere, and the DNA is similar. That doesn't mean we're going to find other creatures that are exactly like us. Just because you have a double helix DNA everywhere, evolution creates such a variety of life, we're unlikely to find life that looks like us. But we could find life that we could trace back to a common ancestor, no matter where you are in the galaxy. It's conceivable.
Yeah, that's very fascinating.
So yeah, this is why science is fascinating, and I love it.
It really is, and once you hear the whys, it just makes so much more sense and explains things that I have been told so much. It's so funny.
And you would have heard the other side of that. You at some point would have heard Ken Ham say, that they believe that we came from a rock from space, without any explanation as to why there could be a rock from space. Life evolved somewhere in the universe. At some point, there was the right conditions of the right kind of molecules. There was the right amount of energy in place to make it happen, and we went from having just sets of amino acids and base building blocks of life to having something that was alive. And that might have gone through as perhaps starting out of a virus and then moving on from a virus to being a microbe or something like that, and then you evolve up to having your water bears and things like that, your smaller type multicellular animals. So it takes time, but some of these developments could have happened without there being planets, with there being planetesimals. We know there are clouds of gas in space, which there are no planets there and everything, that have some of the amino acids just that form in those clouds because of the energy that comes from nearby stars. So we have some of the building blocks of life forming in space. You don't even need a planet. So if you've got an early solar system forming and there's already some of these building blocks there, and then you get the right conditions, you can have microbial life start. And then from there, it's, once you've got it, you just have to have the right triggers come in place. You could have, microbial life was on our planet from not long after its formation to 300 million years ago. And then, of course, we had an explosion of diversity. We have multicellular organisms. For some reason, something changed in our atmosphere, in our oceans, that enabled this Cambrian explosion of life. And that once the multicellular organisms started to take hold, they just continued to diversify and change. It was the survival of the fittest mostly comes about by, how do I defend myself from the predator that wants to kill me? Or how do I become a better predator so that I can overcome the defenses of this? And that's the fight. We developed bigger brains in part to defend ourselves. Because having a bigger brain meant that we would function better as a group. And as a group, we were better able to defend ourselves and ensure the survival of ourselves as a species. And that bigger brain also enabled us to become a better predator as well at the same time. Because prior to getting the bigger brains, you look at you look at our earlier ancestors, but you look at the equivalent of what those earlier ancestors were in the ape world at the moment, and you see that they're pretty intelligent, but they have a lot of the same social skills as us, some of them, but not all of them, but they don't have some of that drive that we have. They don't have that higher edge of hunting and things like that. And that was our brain developing initially to protect us, and then to become the predator, because being able to hunt and kill meat and then cook meat, once we figured out how to do fire, meant we got more protein out of the meat, and then we grew bigger brains because we had better diets. And evolution took its role in that. So it is amazing.
And you're so right. Ken Ham would just say, we came from a rock, and leave it at that. Or evolution is, we're no longer, or why are there still monkeys? It's this twist of what actually was said, and then no explanation as to how scientists got to that fact that makes it make sense. It's just this off the wall, well, of course we didn't come from apes, and leave it at that, and not explain it.
Because it's a lot easier to say, we came from rocks, without explaining it. Because if you say, we got a person from a rock, of course that sounds ridiculous.
Right.
But if you go to the thing of, no, what we actually had was chemicals that combined in a certain way, which was the natural way for these sort of chemicals to combine anyway, when they had the right amount of energies there. That energy came from early stars, so these chemicals combined. I mean, it's still happening in space. We can, like I said, we see the clouds of amino acids that are powered by nearby stars, and they form these. We've got clouds of alcohol in space, because alcohols. Really? Yeah. There are actual clouds of alcohol that have been formed by the energy from stars and the carbon chains form. So, these things happen. So, if you've got these complex chemicals forming, because you've got enough energy in the form of stars, and you've got enough of these chemicals in one space, which, thank you, gravity, and you've got the electromagnetic effects that cause the chemical reactions. And as you apply more energy to those particles, they get more excited. They clang into each other more often and more energetically, and eventually combine, and they create. You know, if you explain it from this has to happen and this has to happen, you get to the point where, okay, this starts to make sense, because you're starting from something very simple, but you're getting something more complex. And at every stage of it, it's a natural thing. We know these chemicals combine if you give them enough energy, because, you know, it's what they want to do. You've got the different charges within the actual chemicals, within the elements themselves, and then the chemicals themselves as they form larger chemicals, and those molecules want to join together, and they become more complex as you apply more energy, and eventually you get the amino acids that you need to start building life. And these things happen we can do it under laboratory conditions. That's what the Michelson-Morley. No, it's not. Michelson-Morley is entirely different. My brain's gone elsewhere. I'll ignore myself for a second. So Jenny's going to kill me in the chat for that one. Michelson-Morley has to do with was detecting the ether.
Okay.
Trying to detect the ether. I don't know why my brain went with Michelson-Morley. I just plugged a name out that had absolutely nothing to do with what I was talking about. My brain does that. So when you know, you know a lot of you know an awful lot about a lot of things, but none of it well enough to actually. But yeah, you eventually get to the point where you've got those amino acids and you've got all those building blocks of life. So then you're just waiting for the right environment where you've got all these things gathered together, maybe in a little pool of water on a floating rock somewhere, and the right amount of energy comes into that. It could be the form of a collision with a slightly smaller rock that applies more heat, or it gets close enough to a star that you get enough energy, and then you get microbial life. Now, the exact mechanism that goes from being those amino acids to a life, we don't totally understand. We don't understand abiogenesis that well. But we know it can happen because it has happened, because we're here. So just because we can't do it in a lab doesn't mean it didn't happen, because we know it happened. Did it happen more than once? Who knows? The chances of it happening might be very, very low, but once it happens, then you have the potential of that life, wherever it happened, moving around an entire galaxy, assuming those microbial lives can survive long enough to get out there in space. And we're pretty sure they can survive for thousands upon thousands of years once they're in their dormant phase. So, yeah, a whole galaxy could be populated from one life event. So, and you've got 13.8 billion years for this one life event to happen. Yeah, of course it can happen. You know, we already know that most of the steps to getting there we can make happen. And you don't have to try very hard. I mean, they're still happening out there in space. These chemicals are still coming together. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you know,
have I got bad spelling in my banner? Yeah, sure. I'll fix it later. It's not the first time I've had banners with spelling mistakes in them. Dyslexia is my friend. Usually it's transposed letters and my brain doesn't even realize I've done it.
Yeah, I've done that as well.
Dyslexia is fun.
I need to learn how to do all of the stuff that
I've been doing. Well, I told you, yeah. I'm always willing to help. So.
Thank you. I'm hoping this weekend I can start putting stuff up on my channel. So.
Oh, awesome. Well, everyone should go and subscribe to you if they're not already. I have been putting your link in the chat, and I will eventually put it in the description down below. If anybody's wondering why Jade's link is in the description down below, is because Jade messaged me about half an hour before I was due to start and go, I'll join you. And I go, cool, I'll interview about your experience with science. So please go and subscribe to Jade. She is absolutely lovely, and yeah, go and subscribe. Yes, Nerdy, OBS Studio forever. I'm sorry I haven't been paying much attention to the chat. I've been enjoying the discussion too much. I haven't even played with the fun stuff I did for this stream. I've got a whole heap of bells and whistles things, but this wasn't really the stream for them. It was more us talking about bits and pieces of science and chatting about things, which was really what I wanted, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it because it's been really interesting to hear your take on it. I know we've gone off topic a bit, but it's been adjacent to topic because the main reason why you have, as a young Earth creationist, miss out on that aspect of science is because of all the other things we've talked about, all those bits of indoctrination, all those other things that come up as part of being a young Earth creationist is what stops you getting that full education in science. Because if you get that full education in science, you go, well, this can't possibly be true. Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily take people away from religion, but I think it's more likely to if you're a young Earth creationist. I mean, I've said to you, because I was brought up to be self-critical but still be able to be religious. It took me a really long time to come out of religion because I didn't have a need to. I could still follow science. I could still learn everything I wanted to learn, and I didn't have to deny any of it because my faith was so flexible. So having a flexible faith is actually harder to come out of than it is if you've got a faith that is doctrine. Here, you got to follow this.
Yep.
If so, for you, once you go, okay, this doesn't make sense. What else doesn't make sense? Okay, it's all fallen down. It's a house of cards. For me, there was no house of cards. It was, that's perfectly fine. I can have a different opinion. I remember as a teenager, the church I was in was discussing how they could, because I was one of the few teenagers who was actually in the church because they were getting older, but they were still very open to things. And they said that they had a meeting and they wanted to see how they could appeal to a younger church, how they could make the church more exciting. And I said, have you looked at this building? It's as drab as all hell. And I said that in the middle of a meeting, and they go, I've been wanting, all these older people in the church go, I've been wanting to say that for ages, thank you. Like, but it's the truth. If you don't have something exciting, people won't be part of it. And it's something that evangelicals understand is, oh yeah, we've got to be, even if we can't be on what's new with what science and everything, we have to culturally appropriate these other forms of music and entertainment, but make our own styles of it because it's what the young people want. So we've got to give them what they want, but we've got to give it to them packaged in our own little young Earth creationist thing. So that's why you end up with Christian, especially designed Christian music or special Christian videos and these are the things that you have to watch as a good young Christian. But it's okay because you're getting the secular experience while still worshiping God.
Yes. I actually didn't get very much of the secular experience either. My mom wanted to shelter me completely from it. So we watched...
Oh, so you didn't get that bit?
Nope. It was completely, if you don't learn about it, it's better. So... we watched like all of Kirk Cameron's videos, like the Left Behind series and Fireproof and all the Christian movies that were coming out. And we only got to listen to Christian music. So Christian rap and Christian rock. And they definitely play towards trying to engage the younger crowd in fun ways, since they can't, like you said, have these fun and exciting new things because nothing's ever new in church. So like my youth group pastor was always trying to be this cool, hip Christian pastor to get more people in. And it's definitely, let's just shelter you from everything in reality.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I especially looking at it as an Australian, looking at what happens in America in the fundamental, I know it happens here, but it to a large extent, as the general community separated from it, whereas it seems to be that that fundamentalism is very much in the American eye all the time, whereas in Australia it's not. We know it exists and we know there's fundies everywhere, but it's not in the general eye of everybody. We're more that the society itself is generally more secular. So it always amazes me when when I see the level of indoctrination there even is, like, in your politics.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, when you've got, I mean, we get ministers in Parliament who get up and deny science as well, but you see it every day in America, and I'm like,
and make laws.
How does this happen?
Yeah, I know. I actually live in a state that is very Republican, and our governor is an extreme fundamental Christian. And so she's constantly, especially right now, passing legislation that props up her belief over what our state wants. So she's trying to ban critical race theory in our state from being taught in school. Actually, she did sign an executive order banning it already. She also signed an executive order banning trans rights for students who want to participate in sports. Yep. So our governor actively passes laws that are against scientists. Like, we've had people tell her these are not good things. We've had people explain the consequences to her. We've had medical professionals come in and explain these things to her, and she doesn't care. And she keeps touting, you know, we need to do what the Bible says, and puts it on her public governor page even. Now
I know these things have been happening for years in American politics. It's been the way of the Republican, pretty much. But Trumpism at a federal level has made it very public to the rest of the world that this is the way this is happening. Because
that's probably true.
The rest of the world is like, yeah, well, we know America's a bit odd and everything, and then you guys elect Trump, and the rest of the world goes, what the fuck? What the hell are you lot doing? You know,
that is so true. He made it acceptable to be more vocal, and so the people that were, you know, fundamental and conspiracy theorists were still here, and we still had these ideas in our politics, but I don't think it was quite as vocal. And politicians weren't comfortable coming out and vocally saying that they agreed with these conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Whereas now, the Republican Party is trying to make it that they're not conspiracies, and it's almost offensive that you can even think. Yeah. And so our politicians are vocally saying these crazy conspiracy theories.
And then underneath that, I mean, aside from the failure of education there is for people who grew up in young earth creationism, there's a failure of education even in secular schools in the US.
Yes.
And I realize that's partly to do with the way your schools are funded. Like, if you're wealthy, your kids go to a school which actually teaches them shit. If you're poor, because the funding is directly related to the wealth of the area that the school is in, you get crap. You don't get a proper education because you don't get the better teachers. You don't get the better school books. You don't have the facilities because you don't get the money. And I find it incredibly disturbing. It would be lovely if the teeth would function properly. Because where I come from, the amount of fundage that gets sent to a school is based on how many students they have.
Yep.
Not on what area they're in. So effectively you get a certain amount of money because you have X number of students, which means even small schools, a bigger school can afford bigger things because they've got a bigger budget, but even a small school can still get the new textbooks, can still get decent teachers, and can still get the right people. Plus, I mean, everybody who teaches in Australia has to have a degree in education. If you're teaching primary school, it's just a degree in education, and you have to have a broad base of knowledge. If you're in high school, you have to have speciality plus a degree in education. So if you're a science teacher, you have a degree in science plus a degree in education, which means
what a crazy concept.
You are well educated, and that they know they're taught how to teach, and they know their subjects. Generally speaking, I have met some teachers who, despite having a science degree, don't know the subject they're talking about. And that's because, despite the fact they have a science degree, they can. I've had teachers who should only really be teaching biology, teaching physics.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's fine. You're in the science department. You can teach all of science, which might have been fine in the 1950s. But now there's more to teach. And most of those, if you're not specialized in a particular area, you might not actually understand what you're trying to teach. Because high school kids are learning about general relativity and the basics of quantum mechanics in high school now. You know, that the degree of what should be being taught in high schools has changed. I was going to say you would have experienced that, but you didn't because you copped the Ken Ham education system.
Yes, I did not get to experience that. But like I have kids that are in school now. My husband has 2 sons, and then I have a daughter. And even in my daughter's education here in our state, we're ranked very lowly and are very low in our education system here in South Dakota. And our books, we don't update our books, so they're still teaching out of books that are from years ago. And so we're not updating anything here either. So the students in our school district aren't learning the things that are relevant and correct today. So I've even had to, on top of my daughter's schooling, teach her stuff at home because she wasn't learning everything. And they do still do a very small part of creationism as an option for how the earth was created. So we had to talk about that and explain how it did not make sense. And she's starting to get it. But even here, like, I have to actively be watching what my kids are learning and sometimes modify what they were taught because it's not accurate anymore.
And yet, is that a public school or not a private one? So so separation church and state ends at the classroom.
Oh, yes. Yes. They're not technically supposed to teach creationism here.
But you get teachers who are actually creationists and they want to say, hey, there's this bit that I have to teach you, but there's also this.
Yes. You can believe this, but around here, we have the idea that creationism is correct, and then they explain creationism, something I am going to be fighting soon. But
yes, I am totally against that. You are a secular. It's a secular school. It's a government-funded school. Keep your religion out of it. Yes,
100%.
Separation church and state. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it sucks here because our governor thinks that religion should be taught in school, and that our nation or our country was founded as a Christian nation, and so God does belong in school. And the reason America is going so badly right now is because we took God out of our schools. Because, adding God back in our schools will solve all of the world's problems. Yeah.
It always amazes me when they talk about, we were founded as a Christian nation. When you talk in the US, most of the founding fathers were agnostic at best, or deists. They weren't necessarily strong Christians, and most of the stuff about God that has come into your Constitution, everything came later. It was not in the original stuff.
I'm actually learning about all of that right now because I'm reading Andrew Seidel's The Founding Myth.
Yeah.
So fascinating. And none of this stuff was taught in my history book so far. I'm like halfway through it, and I haven't learned about any of this until recently. So our education system does not teach these things either. So everyone around me believes that America is a Christian nation, and I'm constantly having to defend that it is not.
No, it was deliberately founded as a secular nation, and that was the intention of the original. That the freedom of religion wasn't a freedom of Christianity. It was a freedom of any religion and a freedom from religion.
Yes.
And that's something that they don't understand. Yep.
No, they people in my life specifically believe that the freedom of religion does not guarantee you the freedom from religion.
Yeah. Yes. They haven't read their own constitution.
No, none of them actually have. If you ask them, they will say, no, but I know what it says.
But these are the same people that argue that the Second Amendment that's the gun one, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
That it gives them the right to carry a submachine gun.
Yes.
Yeah, these are the same people, literally. And a historical context for your right to bear arms was the right of a state to have a militia to protect that state from unfair. It wasn't about the individual. It was the right to. It was a right to states to defect their to protect their independence, and the country as a whole to protect its independence. It wasn't about your right to carry a gun down the street with bullets in it so you could shoot somebody you had an argument with. That's not what it's about.
Or your right to carry militia grade or military grade weapons. Like we didn't have semi-automatic or automatic weapons. We didn't have these huge explosive things that you can own now as an American. These are not protected rights for you. What they were
protecting was your right to carry a musket.
Yes.
And I'm happy for any of you buggers to carry a musket. Go and carry your musket. I want to see how much damage you can do with a musket when the cops come in there with their sidearms and take you down. Exactly. Bye mass shootings. No one's going to try and do a mass shooting with a musket.
Well, oh gosh, and then you talk to Americans about mass shootings and they're staged. Our government is doing them.
Far out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the conspiracy runs deep.
Yes, it does. And then you have politicians saying that these conspiracies are true, and that just makes it so much worse. They're giving validation to people who hear these things, think, oh, that's cool, and don't look into it. And then they have a politician say, oh, yes, these are staged events. And you're like, okay, yep, it's true.
I realize most people will think that I come across as completely anti-gun. I'm not anti-gun. I'm pro-gun control.
Yes.
There is a difference. You know,
yep,
I'm not. I honestly believe in strict gun controls that should be adhered to. Proper gun licensing, requirements for proper storage with separate storage of gun and ammunition, and things like that. If you want to have fun, if you want to go to the rifle range and you want to shoot off some rounds and let off some steam, shooting at a target, go for it. You should be allowed to do that. I'm totally for that. If you're somebody who's in an area where there's a particular form of wildlife that's causing a problem and you enjoy hunting and you're not going to actually cause a huge impact on the environment, go for it. Go for a hunt. Eat the things you kill. Don't just go willy-nilly killing. You gotta eat them. But fine, go for a hunt. But no, this open slather, this open carry of weapons down the street, no one needs that. There is no requirement for that. And I think part of the problem is America is a country where people live in fear.
Yes.
Fear is instilled. It's not just a religious thing. Fear is instilled. Your media drives the frenzy of fear. Oh, this happened. Oh, protect yourselves. Protect your families. Fear on top of fear. And that fear is what drives people to go, I need a gun. I need to protect myself. Yep. And it drives the criminals to go, well, I need a gun because I need to be able to be better than the guy who might be standing next to me is going to stop me. And it's a great big roller coaster of where we have to be with guns to allow for the fact that the underlying cause is people are afraid. Because if you ask, I think most sensible people, as long as your gun's not taken away from you to the point where you can't even go to the range and have a shot and have a bit of fun shooting, then I think honestly most sensible people won't care if there were stronger gun laws.
Right. And there's as long as you can still do like you said, go to the gun range, do your hunting stuff. You don't need a semi-automatic for either one of those things, or an
Nope.
automatic.
Although I will allow for the fact that if you're somebody who likes hunting bears, you probably do need a semi-automatic, because I would not like to miss and they get torn to pieces.
I guess it does probably depend
on what you're hunting.
Yes.
But you'd have to have a justification for that, and you should be trained in its use.
Yes. My uncle and his family have 20 plus guns, most of them semi-automatic, just to take pictures with and pose with and to feel badass. And because we're, close to the end times, eventually it will be used against other people, non-Christians, to defend what they have. And
it doesn't take much to convince those who are heavily indoctrinated that the end times are here, even if they're not. So it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you have an armed militia within a religion, I mean, we've already seen the outcomes of that. We've seen what happened at Waco and things like that. That this is not a good thing when you're in a country that doesn't have solid gun control.
No, and my family does believe we're in the end times right now. So, they're already in that mentality of Jesus is coming back soon. We're going to have to, and Christian persecution to the point where they're going to die if they don't reject Jesus is coming soon. So they're preparing for having to defend their faith with their lives very soon. And that's terrifying. I have, my uncle has 4 children, 18 to, I think she's 6 now. And they believe this as well. They're growing up in the same environment that I grew up in. And that's terrifying for me. I see pictures of my cousins in head to toe spandex flag outfits, holding semi-automatic rifles, walking down the street in a town of 500 people. Nothing's happening to you there. You have no reason to walk around with 6 different guns on your body walking down the street.
I see pictures of that and I'm like, you what?
Yeah, I just don't get it. What's your purpose here? What point are you trying to get across?
It comes back to fear, because there has to be an element of fear. I'm sure there's an occasional person who it's all about, oh, look at me, I'm the big person. I look how tough I am. I've got all these guns. It's a penis compensator for a lot of guys. I'm pretty sure of that. Yes. But for most people, it's an element of fear. Most people I know who carry a gun carry it out of fear. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a dreadful indictment on the society that a lot of America has become, that people are that afraid.
Yep.
And a lot of it's instilled fear through religion. A lot of it's instilled through the media.
Yep.
And the ongoing situations that breeds in the terms of mass shootings and things like that, because these guns are now available, fuels that fear even more. So I've got to have a gun. To be perfectly honest, if you're stuck somewhere and there's a mass shooter, you having a gun's not going to help.
No, it's not.
Because quite frankly, you pulling out your gun and trying to shoot the mass shooter, you're probably going to shoot somebody else. Or hurt yourself. Or you're going to draw attention to yourself and get yourself shot. So, yeah, your better option is to find somewhere to hide, and so you don't get shot. So, you carrying a gun doesn't offer any extra defense. I mean, this is the one that's always got me with schools. Oh, how do we defend our schools? Well, let's have gun detectors and armed guards in our school. Yeah, how is that making the school safer?
Yeah, no, it's not.
You need to stop. You need to change the culture, and you need to remove some of that culture of fear. This is where the difference is between the US and Canada. No, I'm not a Canadian, so I don't want to speak too much about what it's like in Canada, but I know that the rate of gun ownership in Canada is very similar to the US. And yet, even in cities which have high population over there, you don't have the same level of gun violence. And part of that is there's not the fear. There's not that ongoing fear. So people don't feel like they have to carry their weapons, even though they own them. They're like people in Australia are, well, we don't need a gun. They might have a gun because they like to go to the range or they like to go hunting, but they don't have to have the gun. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference. There isn't that fear. There isn't that ongoing fear that, oh, well, if I walk outside, I might get shot, so I need to carry a gun so I can shoot them first.
Yep.
That is the worst possible thinking. The worst possible thinking. And yet, it's culturally endemic. Yep. I think that's a fair statement to say, that it's culturally endemic. Yeah. So it's something that needs to change, and I'm not exactly sure how or if it can change. There has to be a political will for it to change, and there certainly isn't that. Even amongst the Democrats, there isn't the political will for that sort of change. And the commercialism that you have in the US is so much part of the culture that the commercial interests don't want it to change either, because there's too much money made from selling firearms.
Yes. Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's why the NRA got so powerful, although not as powerful now as they once were. But that's the thing. Yeah, I love how we do that.
I know.
We are no longer religious, but thank God.
It's funny. I was definitely held the belief that, you weren't supposed to take the Lord's name in vain. So I never said Jesus or God in a derogatory way, and was really offended when other people did. And now I think it's hilarious. And I try to say Jesus Christ or God in a slur as much as possible, just for my own personal satisfaction.
Yeah.
For years of not having to say it.
The habits that we develop, and I mean, worse for you than it would be for me, but I do that. I also, oh God. Yeah, but I'll say, but it not necessarily derogatory, but like, I'll say thank you. I will occasionally go, thank God for that. Jesus be praised. I've caught myself saying stuff like that, and I'm like, where does that come from? I've been out of Christianity for probably 15 years and an atheist for the last, I think, about 8. So where does that come from? And part of it's indoctrination. And my level of indoctrination wouldn't be the same as you had, but there was still that element of indoctrination of saying thank you to God. Saying thank you for the food you eat. Saying thank you because something nice happened. That it was God's fault. This nice thing happened to you because of God. Just say thank you for it. It's like I have a friend. She's like a sister to me, but she is fairly fundamentalist in her religious thinking. And she will legitimately say to me, I lost my keys, but I found it. Praise God, he was amazing. He helped me find my keys. Okay. Are you sure you shouldn't give credit for the fact that you spent 3 hours looking for them? It's like...
I know. And it's
in what part of that?
If it doesn't happen, it's, God's trying to teach you a lesson. If it does happen, it's, thank God. You answered my prayers.
Yeah. Because if it doesn't happen, God was too busy or it wasn't that important, so maybe I shouldn't have troubled God with that problem.
Yep.
The universe doesn't work like that.
No, it doesn't. Thank goodness.
You should have said thank God. It would have been great.
I know, thank God.
Thank God. Thank God the universe doesn't work like that. I constantly, every day, say thank God there is no God.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you, God, for not being.
Thank you. Yes. So glad you're not there. Thank you.
You're getting lots of praise in the chat, and a few new subscribers, I think. So I've tweeted out. I've added into the chat your links a few times now. So hopefully we've got a few new subscribers for you, Jay, because you are amazing, and I have had so much fun with this discussion. But we've been going nearly 2 hours. I think we probably should wind up.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I suppose.
I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I couldn't have asked for a better start to this this new format. And I know we strayed very far from science in a lot of it. But it was important, too, to see where that comes from, where that enclosed Christian science comes from, and how that indoctrination holds you away from what real science is and keeps you thinking that, the Christian scientists are right. It was brilliant to see that perspective, Jade. And as somebody who never had that, even though being a Christian, it's mind-blowing to me that there's this element that can say that religion, that from a religious point of view, you can deny so much science whilst accepting other bits of it. It's like, no, well, if it's not backed up by my book, or if it's in contradiction to my book, no, it can't be real. It just can't be.
But anything that fits the book, that's right.
Yeah, but if it fits the book, we'll accept the bits that fit and throw the rest out.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And no, that doesn't work that way. So, Jay, why don't we finish up with you telling people about yourself and what you're doing on your channel? And I will, I've already thrown you a link, but I'm going to throw it again. And people can go over and sub to Jade, because she is amazing, and everyone should get to know her because she is brilliant. And encourage her in her new atheist life.
And thank you so much for having me on. I'm glad that I saw your message in time, and
it was brilliant.
I really enjoyed talking to you on hereticals. So I was excited to get to
and I'm so excited to have you here. I said there that I wanted to have you on my channel, and you've been the first person on my new show, so I am so grateful for that. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. This was so much fun, and we did go off a little bit there, but it really does all tie together,
It does.
Allowing me to not believe things that were true and believe things that weren't true all had to do with how I was raised. So, but yes, I am on YouTube as well. I just am getting started, so I'm hoping this weekend to record my first video and get that put out. I am going to kind of go through the things that I am processing in my deconstruction from religion. So I'm going to start with purity culture, because that has kind of been the hardest one for me to get out of. It's the hardest indoctrination for me to give up, especially the way that I view my body and how purity culture affected that. So that's kind of what I want to do first, and I'm hoping to put that out this weekend.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we've been remodeling our house, and we finally got it done. So I have my studio finally set up and can spend some time on this. So hopefully today's Saturday. Hopefully later today, I can work on recording that and get that put out. And then I love doing things like this, coming on other channels and getting to talk to other people and hear explanations for things that I have been so curious about and maybe didn't even realize I was curious about until I start hearing it. Because there were things that we talked about today where I didn't realize my understanding of those things was still incorrect based on my education. And you do such a great job of explaining what you want and then explaining each little step in the process. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
And that helps, because then I don't feel silly asking all these questions that I may have wanted to ask. You already answered them.
Honestly, people should never feel silly asking questions. Asking questions is how we learn. Don't be afraid to be wrong either. I've always said, I used to do a show, this is replacing an old show I used to do called Stump Jam, where people in the chat would ask me questions and try to find topics that I didn't, they got used to the topics I didn't know about eventually, but it was fun. But it was me learning as well, because if I didn't know something, I had to go and find it out. And I could be wrong. And if people told me I was wrong in the chat, that was brilliant, because I learned too. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And this goes to everyone in the chat. Do not be afraid to ask questions. Do not be afraid to be wrong, but be open to be corrected and to learn things the right way. Because every day we should be aiming to learn something new, because there's always something new to learn. So ask questions. Ask them. I won't say I always know the answers, because I won't, but I might know somebody who does.
And I really appreciate it. And that too has been so great, being on all these shows, if I have had a question about anything and reached out to someone, if they didn't know, they know someone who does, and they've put me in touch with someone who can help me find the answers. So, and I'm pretty much to the point where I'm just saying I know nothing at this point. Like I'm relearning everything in my life. So I'm fully expecting to be corrected and wrong on many things. I just hope that people can give me patience and understanding as I learn to correct myself in these things.
And you know we will.
So
and
far,
anyone
yes.
who doesn't, they'll answer to me. They'll probably answer to Chris first. Actually, I think Chris has got a huge soft spot for you, Jade.
He's amazing.
He's in the chat, so he'll have heard that.
Oh, really? I have a hard time reading the chat and
it is a learned skill. It takes so long to get used to it. This particular chat, I haven't paid that much attention to what's going on in the chat. I have noticed who's in there. I haven't taken questions from the chat because this is the first trial of this. I haven't used all the things that I've designed for it. Jade has seen a lot of them because she got a sneak preview a couple of weeks ago before Six Pack, but other people will see that in later things. To give people a bit of a heads up with this show, there'll be interviews like this where I talk to different people about science from different angles. Jade's angle was from somebody who came out of young Earth creationism and is discovering science almost for new, which is brilliant. And you're discovering it to teach your daughter as well, which is brilliant. I think that's amazing. There'll also be interviews with other science communicators. I've got a list of people that I've approached, and some of them have already said yes. So I've got a few people who will be coming on who will be talking to and discussing more in-depth things about science. There are a few scientists who will be on, people with actual degrees or working towards degrees like Matt, who's in the chat, almost a doctor. Matt is amazing. He'll also be co-hosting with me on a few of the shows. And I hope to have you back again, Jade, not so much as a guest, but as a co-host to have some of these discussions with people. That's the idea. Well, there'll be a revolving door of co-hosts. Often it'll just be me by myself with whoever my guest is, but it'll be a variant show where we cover a few different things. If people who are here for the original, the intro video, keep an eye on that because it's going to change weekly. It's just slightly, so look out for the different things in it. And very Simpsons-like. And this is going to be the fun new format with guests and fun and discussions about science and things adjacent to science and other things not just science related. I'm hoping I'll drag Chris on at some point and we'll do a bit of a history discussion, maybe some of the history of science, but just history in general, because Chris is doing a history degree, so I think it'd be amazing to have that discussion with him. I am planning to have Scientist Mel and Navadia on to also talk about some biology because it's not my field. and things like that. So I'm planning some big discussions. There are people who are other science communicators in the community who I am intending to bring in to be a part of the show. Especially Matt, who Matt blows my mind with his knowledge on things. I love having people around me who make me feel stupid because I learn more. Yes. And every time I can learn, it makes me happy. And I've learned so much today from you, Jay, because there was aspects of what you went through that I don't understand because I come from my Christianity from different ways. So it's great. I've learned more, which is brilliant. That's brilliant as far as I'm concerned. The more we learn, the better the world is. The more we learn. Oh. So I've
learned a lot today. So
thank you so much for being here. Please, everybody, go and subscribe to Jade if you haven't already. Where's my mouse pointer? I will repost it. There we go. please go and subscribe to Jade. If you're not subscribed here, please subscribe. I also have a Patreon now that actually is listed in the description, so you can see, you can all have a preview of one of my little animations. So please go and please go and support me on Patreon if you have a little bit of spare cash and you can help out with the channel, because I'm aiming to improve it all the time, and there's things I want to do and stuff I want to add to my setup so I can make this even a better production and give us some more outlets to science within the community, because I think we need them. We need more of these science type discussions and more of bringing people in and just talking about their aspects and coming towards science, and then the surrounding topics that come off that, because I always diverge from the original topic.
Me too.
So anyway, again, thank you so much, Jade, for joining me, and thank you to everybody in the chat, and please try not to choke on the selfie stick. Bye.
Bye.